Thank you, Shady, and thank you, Lost City Books, for hosting this event. We're super excited to be here. I'm Elizabeth Von Oosten. I'm the founder of PaperJam.
And I'm Sarah Piepenbrink. I'm the editor of PaperJam. It's working? Yes.
Sure it is. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, let's go to the first slide. Okay, so this is an outline of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to give a little bit of context to DC zine history. DC has a rich history of music zines being made in the city. We're going to talk about the origin of PaperJam, how we got started. We're going to go deep into what PaperJam is. We're going to talk about where PaperJam is going and what our hopes are for the future. And then we're also going to go over how y'all can get involved as community members. And then we'll have a Q&A for you guys to ask questions and give feedback. So that's what we're going to do. So for a little bit of context, if you don't know about PaperJam, we are a paper zine and online resource hub for the DC DIY music community. We started in March 2021 as a way to document the music scene's experience in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. PaperJam connects artists and fans with new music, interviews, art, writing, events, and actions to support DC DIY culture. Oh yeah, so this is us again. Picture of me, picture of Sarah. We look great. Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what you do as the founder and director?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I'm going to go into it. I think when we talk about what PaperJam is, yeah, we're sort of a dream team. Pleasure. Also, I have to mention that Sarah not only is the editor but also the hand model for our photos. With yeah. Beautiful. DC music scene history. So a collection covers of music zines. All of these come from the DC Zine Archive, which is part of the DC Public Library. It's totally accessible online to anybody. You don't even have to have a library card. But yeah, since the 1970s, fanzines, punk zines, activist zines have been made in the city. People who are passionate about these issues. Capital Crisis are some of the bigger zines. Maybe folks who have been in the zine world in DC recognize some of these names. I researched this archive quite a bit. Is that the content of them really resonate with issues for today. So a lot of these zines talk about creating safe music spaces in a gentrifying and more expensive city, gentrification in general as an issue, sexism and racism in the music scene and how to deal with that, and then also just like straight up fan photos and fan culture happening. There's a lot of joy as well. So these were a huge inspiration for me starting the zine. So here's a screenshot of the zine archive. Like I said, I encourage you all to check it out yourselves. It's all accessible online, and each zine, going back to 1971, has been painstakingly scanned high res, so you can read them all. I could spend all day in this archive. I'll also say that zine culture is alive and well even now. DC Zine Fest happens annually, and we also have a DC Zine Fest organizer here today with us tonight. Yeah, so I think my first exposure to zines in DC was through DC Zine Fest, and there's other zine happening October 24th, in the Zine Fest. That was, yeah. So we'll talk about how PaperJam got started. Okay, this is the most embarrassing slide. A lot of pictures of me. But for some context, yeah. yeah, Mikey took some of these pictures. So I am a drummer, and I love shows, and I love the DC DIY music culture here, and it's very important to me. So that's some context. I'm also a designer. So can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So obviously when COVID happened, I'm sure all of you, our lives were disrupted. It was a really scary time. But what was really tragic was that we could no longer have live music and share space and have community happen in the physical space anymore. So that was kind of how I got to thinking, next slide, how can we create a safe space for the DC DIY music community? And when I say safe space, I mean emotionally safe, but also in this time, physically safe. How can we document the DC music scene during COVID? Even though it feels like it's been forever, COVID is not going to be impacting us in the way that it is forever. And we're going to look back on it, and it's going to probably feel like a relatively short time, I imagine. And so I really wanted to document how people were responding, how musicians were coping. The music scene didn't disappear just because COVID hit. It just changed. And so I thought it was really important for us to document our own history and keep track of all of that, because a lot of it was really inspiring. And then the last thing I wanted to achieve was to connect readers to interviews, articles, music, artwork, and resources to support the music scene. So things like COVID relief funds and donation pages for things like Rhizome, DIY art space, and things like that. Okay, so this is a flip through the first issue of PaperJam. It was very exciting to have the first issue finally real, physical. So yeah, here's a little preview. We're gonna print some more of them for Zine Fest if you do want to get your hands on the first issue. But as of now, we're just printing issue 2. Yeah, so what is PaperJam? Okay, so the purpose, PaperJam, I already spelled it out, but the initial purpose is to create a safe space for the DC DIY music community, document the music scene during the COVID-19 pandemic, and also to connect readers to the DC DIY culture and also resources for the DC DIY culture. So I would say one of the biggest things we do in PaperJam is have very in-depth interviews with musicians, venue organizers. We have music photographers coming up in the next issue, but we have different members in the music community, and I so far have been doing the interviews, but as we move forward, other folks are going to be doing the interviews, which is exciting. Yeah, we just, each interview, we have like multiple pages of just in-depth perspective of these different music community members. So Adriana Lucia Coates, who was the front woman of Mock Identity, DC punk band, was one of our first interviews. Ripping Headaches, a DC metal scene organizer, just basically single-handedly built the metal scene in DC. Also was one of our initial interviews and gave just a really incredible interview. Catherine Fernando. Catherine is the owner of Black Cat. So she was interviewed for issue 2. And then we also had Elijah Jamal Balbad. Elijah is a go-go and jazz artist. Even though I was looking at the DC punk scene archive, PaperJam isn't just a punk scene. It's really important to me that PaperJam represents many facets of the music scene. And so jazz and go-go are really important to DC music culture. And so it was important that Elijah was represented. Elijah also really inspirationally did a bunch of pop-up shows in Malcolm X Park weekly during the real depths of COVID winter. And then JL Jaguar, the guitarist from Priests, and also now in a new group called Exotic International. Okay, so in addition to interviews, we also have some articles. Thankfully, the articles are not written by me. This article is written by Nico Rao. Nico is a frontman of multiple bands and gave his perspective of moving forward as a community post-COVID. We also had this piece, Through My Lens, by Aman El Said. Aman is a musician. Her project is called Stony. She's also a photographer and creative in the music scene. This was a piece by Andrew Grossman, the frontman of The North Country. This piece was about how to write music during a pandemic and the challenges of that. Okay, so we also have lists of new music out of DC. So this was our first list. Again, it's a range. We've got metal and R&B and punk. And then this one also, we've got some drum and bass. We've got some experimental. So all of this is accessible through our Instagram and also through the back of the zine. And then I would say, potentially most importantly, we have a list of resources to support the music scene. So for each issue, we try to cycle through either different donation pages or relief funds for different music organizations and nonprofits and art spaces to support. We also have a lot of beautiful artwork. I'm a designer and artist, and it's really important to me that things are beautiful. The zine is for folks who are interested in the music scene already and are already involved, but I also want to trick people who are not with beautiful design and get them interested in the zine. So we have different collaborating artists make pieces for each issue. This is a collage by Courtney Gross. That is an illustration by me. And then this is a print by Nora Walker on the left, a lineup print, very beautiful issue 2. We also have merch. Each issue comes with a poster and stickers. That was from the first issue. And this newest issue, we have a beautifully printed Riso print. And we also individually. So at the back of the zine, there is a QR code that will link to a Linktree that has all the music that is portfolios, all of the resources and relief funds. It's important to me that PaperJam is not the Elizabeth creative platform for other folks, and so I want to make all of the content as accessible as possible. If you don't buy the zine, you can get off. Is this the part where you talk? Great. Yeah, it's on. I had a lot of connections and friends who were already very involved in the music scene. So to get going, I was like, okay, well, who can I convince to give me their time and attention and energy? Adriana and Ruby Headaches were both acquaintances and friends of mine. That's how I did it initially. But as we're moving forward, we're going to be putting out calls for different folks to get involved, and we want to expand beyond our just immediate social group. That's really important to us.
Yeah, I will say, as somebody who was fairly new to the DC music scene when I got here, I moved to DC in February of 2019, so I had about a year of like regular times before it became COVID restrictions, and it's been a really amazing way to like get to know the music community, maybe in a less conventional way. But already I've met so many cool people that are doing amazing things just through doing PaperJam. So
yeah, and one thing I'll add to that is as it evolves, it's expanding. Adriana, who was our first interviewee, she actually is doing an interview for issue 3 and editing it. Farah Psyche, the amazing punk photographer who's put out a couple books, is going to be in issue 3. We're so excited. We're having folks that were once interviewers doing the interviews and keeping people in that community. I saw you had a question.
I did, yeah. I guess my question is, I know a lot of musicians, just from life, and what do you do to bring them out? Because a lot of them have gone inward and have stopped playing, have stopped looking, have stopped kind of, are traveling. I have a friend of mine, bassist, going to North Carolina because that's the closest gig that he's found. My daughter's in conservatory right now, so I have a musician. So what are you doing to bring out the ones that don't know about you or don't know about the mainstream, and like getting support, help, even like emotionally? I just think it's hard for them. They can't do their craft.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been definitely a hard time, and I think a traumatic time for folks in the music scene and people who are particularly, their craft being so based off of sharing a physical space and being in a tight-knit room. My hope with PaperJam, like looking at the zine archive, it was really, really rich and dense, 70s, 80s, 90s. And then starting in the early 2000s, it really started to dissipate. And so with starting PaperJam, my hope was to revitalize that tradition of DIY storytelling in the district. And my hope is that it gets people excited. We're really excited to constantly be expanding our community, having events like tonight, and then having shows. In December, we'll be having a show here. We're hoping to always be expanding what PaperJam is and kind of crossing the barrier between, a physical paper zine and then also community events. It's certainly been a hard time. I think I want to hear those people's stories and I want to know how they're feeling, and I hope that their voices can be represented in the zine. So definitely we should talk if you want after, and if you have folks that you think their voices should be included in this, I would love to discuss that.
They're mostly my daughter's music teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's crazy, but like one is just like working as a concierge, but he's a bass player, music major from Boston, right? So,
yeah.
And he can't play anywhere. That's just one. There's just, and then, I think the teachers that teach are still able to have a paying gig, but the ones that are just musicians because they love to play, I just found that they're just displaced right now.
Yeah, I would say one thing that I was most impressed by, I'm thinking particularly of the interview with Elijah, who started a series of free music events in parks throughout DC in several different neighborhoods, and had like a rotating schedule and was like sort of a hub for a community of musicians who were finding ways to adapt to practicing their art and performing for people and getting that energy back from people that is like so core to what they do. and finding ways to still get that and meet that need for themselves during a time when they couldn't be indoors with other folks. So Elijah started a group that did jazz at go-go all over
Jazz Mob DC.
Jazz Mob DC.
Yeah.
Thank you. There was a whole social media campaign. There were ways for folks to follow them and know when they could see music happening. And he had this whole vision for how DC could move forward in a way that like made space for the changing world of how we see music and how he as a musician and his community could adapt. So I think people are doing really amazing things and being really creative. And that's been something I've been really impressed by just from the people we've talked to in making PaperJam.
Yeah, and I want to also add to that, like Elijah, not only he started just posting, when he was playing, but then other musicians were like, hey, can you post me like when I'm playing? And he totally did. And he started this whole calendar full of musicians that weren't even his group. He also said that, he had his QR code for his Venmo and he had a box for folks who wanted to give money, that he made quite a bit of money. People were really thankful and excited and eager to support them and their work. So it was incredibly inspiring. Thank you for bringing that. That was a really good point.
Yeah, and I think him being catalyst to start that brought a lot of musicians out of their shells and was like, oh, here's a way that we can adapt and here's a way we can still do what we love, even though we're in this time that makes that difficult.
I imagine it's easier to reach people online than with a paper zine, but since your medium is a paper zine, how do you what's your strategy to actually getting the physical copy to people? Like, are you usually relying on people finding that on social media and then finding it at a bookstore, or just placing around the city and actually getting sales with hard covers, hard copies?
Yeah, so yeah, we our big focus is on our Instagram, and that's how we're finding a lot of new folks. We have a mail order system, so you can just order it online. And we also have 2 price brackets. We have at cost for folks who can't afford or are not in a place to pay support price. And then we have a support price as well, which just allows us to print more zines. But that's a really good question. It's kind of a multi-tiered approach. Sometimes I put PaperJam stickers in bar bathrooms. We have our zine now in quite a few stores. We're in Smash Records, 7 Drum City, Territory, in Brookland, and now here. We also are, having events like tonight and hopefully shows as well. We're tabling at Zine Fest. But that is a really good question of how do we expand our audience? I think it's easy to feel, oh, if the content is good enough, we'll get an audience, but that's not true. It's really important that that we also try to intentionally cultivate an audience and reach out to folks. So that's something that we're constantly brainstorming and kind of trying to talk on. Do you have anything to add to that, though?
I would just put a call out. If you know some place that would love to carry PaperJam DC, that's it.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, congrats. I think there's a rich history of things like this and zines being a catalyst for more involvement and things like that.
Thank you.
What, do you feel I know some of the outlets for covering DC music have sort of gone away. Do you sort of intend to want to, I think the answer is yes, but how do you intend to sort of fill that gap? And then have you seen yet it attracting kind of new people into the music or concert going environment, especially given where we are, with people some people going back and some people not?
Yeah, absolutely. So are we attracting new folks into the music scene? Or what was the other part of the question?
I think I said, what way do you intend to maybe fill some of the other coverage that has waned?
Yeah, well, yeah, we're certainly doing our best. I think something that we really want to focus on is sort of expanding our team, because I certainly, and I think you too, have lots of big and grand ideas and things. It would be wonderful if we could have a PaperJam calendar of DIY events that folks could look at and see and keep track of all the different things happening in DC. we would love to do even more interviews, and and more events, and yeah, like you said, fill that gap. But yeah, I think we're doing as much as we can right now, and I think that the interviews and the perspectives that we have are super valuable, but we know there's so much more, and we really want to try to include as much as possible. So if any of y'all are interested in being involved, we really want to expand our team and our community. Yeah, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say, like, yeah, we're trying to fill a gap, but also, like, we hope to be a catalyst, and make space for other folks who are interested in doing work, even if it's like taking a totally different take on this. Like, we want to partner with you, and like, it can only get bigger by working together. So yeah, we're super excited to hopefully connect with others who are doing this sort of work in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'll say, like, I definitely, sometimes it keeps me up at night where I'm just like, there's so much happening in the city that's so inspiring and I can't cover it all. Like, how are we going to tell everybody's story, and I get overwhelmed. But I think what we're trying to do is just what we are covering, do it as well as possible, and be as accurate and open as possible, and create a platform for who we can. We recently were reached out to by the DC Punk Zine Archive that I referenced earlier. The DC Public Library wants PaperJam in their archive, which we're very excited about. And so does the Punk Zine Archive at the University of Maryland. So, we're already excited to see that even this small piece that we have documented of the music scene during this time is going to technically be a part of the archive and part of history. So we're just eager to continue growing. Yeah.
I'm wondering just if you have any particular opinions on zines as a medium versus, for example, just like writing a blog about the topic, or like, other types of mediums.
Thank you for asking that question. Love that. Yeah, I am all about, the publication design. I think that creating something that is a physical artifact that you can physically engage with and hold and look through is so much more meaningful and impactful. And the point of this is, yes, to like document what's happening now, but also to act as an artifact to remember how things were. And if you have a zine, hopefully it is beautiful enough that you won't throw it away, that you hang on to it and keep it as a way to remember. And so it was really important to me that this zine was physical and could be held and not just a PDF online, because honestly, we're all bombarded with media and images all the time, and it just doesn't sink in for me anyway. It doesn't, I don't absorb it. I don't know how many TikToks I watch every day. So, PaperJam is about being kind of this like slower medium that you take your time, you flip the pages slowly, and that it feels precious and handmade. So that is really, really important to who we are. And I think it also speaks to the tradition of the handmade physical zine and that history in DC.
Yeah, for sure. I would say it's like important to feel a part of like a narrative that reaches back longer than I've been alive, honestly. And to especially like connecting with the DC Zine Library or the Punk Archive, just like continuing on that tradition of doing your own thing and not waiting for somebody to give you permission to do it has been really important. This is how I started doing zines, was like copy and paste on a Xerox machine in like 2004. So it's been really fun to reconnect with this in a new way. Like this is like a hybrid approach. We definitely have like a very strong digital presence, which I think is important for getting it in front of folks, but to have the physical zine is really important to me, and I'm really glad that we're doing it.
Yeah, and also Sarah has a super cool zine collection. Just have to brag there. She does.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What's your printing process like right now? Like, I know you said you used to do it on handmade, obviously, but like on a big scale, how do you do that, but also kind of keep it personal?
Yeah, totally. Well, so I'll say that, yeah, one way that we sort of divert a little bit from like the original like Xerox zine process is we do get our books printed professionally. Basecamp DC is our printer. They're a wonderful local business. I cannot recommend them enough. They're been wonderful to us and do an incredible job. And so, you know, it's still just on printer paper. You know, we're not buying very expensive materials, but they do print it out and they do fold and score and staple it for us. And I think that that's just a matter of like saving time.
We do stuff the envelopes by hands.
We sure do. Yeah, we do that. And I think something to kind of add to that is, you know, I know that DC's, not just DC zines in general tend to have sort of that like DIY, handmade, rough aesthetic, which I love. I'm a huge fan of. But I think when I started this project, one thing I really wanted it to be was authentic. And I am a professional graphic designer, and I wanted it to be well designed. That is something that was authentic to me. And like I said, I also, you know, wanted it to be on the shelf at a store where somebody who maybe doesn't know about the DC zine history, doesn't know what a zine is, doesn't know about the music scene, could still pick it up and get involved. I really wanted it to be like very visually accessible. But yeah, if you ever need anything printed, please go to Basecamp DC. They're so wonderful.
We get our stuff printed at Basecamp too.
I have a question, since you guys are memorializing the DC scene, which is wonderful. Is this a period? I'm just, you know, how do you call it's postmodern? I know that's art, but there's go-go, there's jazz, there's, you know, alternative. What's going on in DC in general? Or is it everything?
It's everything.
Wow. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing I've been really, as a semi-newcomer to DC, one thing I've been really impressed by is like the diversity of the scene here, in terms of musical style, in terms of people, in terms of like the age. Honestly, like I'm not the oldest person it shows, which is really exciting.
Feels good.
It has a really active scene, and so much is going on, and so many creative people. I'm really blessed to be part of it. So.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I'm from DC. I will be a fan of DC my whole life. And so with this project, I want to try and show like, yeah, there's so much happening. There's go-go, there's jazz, there's punk, there's indie, there's like raves and DJs. There's so much different kinds of experimental and noise. It's all happening here, you know, and that's why I'm like, how do we cover all of it? You know, it's overwhelming and it's so inspiring. And even despite COVID and the pandemic, it's still thriving.
Yeah, and one of the things we're trying to highlight with PaperJam is like the people who are doing that work, because that is work, and it takes a lot of work to create a scene like that, and to support the wide breadth of projects that people are working on. Yeah, so that's a big part of why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about one of your favorite experiences while working on PaperJam?
Ooh. Gosh, that's a tough one. I have really enjoyed the whole process. I think maybe the first interview I did with Adriana, it was January. It was freezing. We sat outside with masks on. I was just starting this project. I had a lot of doubt. I didn't know where it was going to go. I didn't know if anyone would care. I didn't know if I could pull it off. So I was pretty nervous interviewing Adriana, and I had my questions, and I was a little shaky at my little phone that was dying because it was cold outside to record her. And but we sat down and we started talking. We drank some red wine and smoked some cigarettes, and the things she had to say were incredible. The conversation that we had was so rich, and as soon as we started talking, my doubt just sort of dissipated. I was like, wait, no, this is actually like worth documenting. This is worth doing, and I think that people will care. So that was really important to me. It was a big shift for me personally. This is before I even asked you to be my editor. It was like I was just like me and my big brain by myself, like coming up with this idea. So and then when you joined, it started like you just like psychically like holding this project with me just was huge. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Talk about your favorite
I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed is working with the folks who are writing articles. Sometimes people will come to us with like an idea, like, oh, I had this experience, and like come with this a pretty raw idea of what they want to work on. And it's been really great to work with folks to be like, oh, that's an amazing story, like right there. Like, tell me more about that. Tell me more about your experience with that. What are you working on now? What are you really excited about? Like, what's like driving you? And seeing the pieces that have come out of that is going to be really proud. So that's been really wonderful. And also working with Elizabeth. I feel like we've become better friends. So we're doing this project together.
Yeah.
We're already friends, but now we're better friends.
I know, but now we're creative partners too. Yeah. I just spilled water all over myself in case anyone didn't notice. I'm like, please take some more pictures.
Sorry.
Cool. Does anyone else have any more questions? Yes, please, Sophia.
What's something aspirational you want to do with the magazine? Like, what's something, if you could like do anything with it for an issue, what's something you really want to do?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I would love to be in more stores. I'd love to like make really sick merch, like t-shirts and hats and hoodies and stuff that people can wear. I would love to have like a show every month. You know, I would love to like have, more issues per year. We're pulling off 3 this year. It'd be cool if we could like actually get to quarterly. I mean, I would love to eventually like apply for some kind of funding so that we could make it way less expensive. Production costs are really high right now. We also have to like produce like small batches because we don't have a ton of money to start. But if we had funding, we could print a lot at a time, and then it would be more accessible and less expensive. But yeah, I mean, this is all about building community. So the more that we can have community events and cover what's happening in this community, like the better, in my mind. What about you?
Yeah, I'm excited. We've floated the idea of some themed issues. We want to do a queer issue. So get at us. We're really excited about that. Maybe for Pride Month next year, but don't hold me to it. That's just a sneak peek.
Yeah, our timeline is flexible. Yes.
Sorry, I'll go one more quick one, but
Sure.
the word like DIY and how that impacts you editorially speaking, I'm just curious if you could speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a really great question because, like I said, like I'm a professional designer, and, the zine maybe looks a little bit more thoughtful. I'm not saying thoughtfully designed because polished, sure. Yeah, absolutely. But I absolutely will die on the hill that it is a DIY project because no, truly, I'm not a music journalist. Neither are you.
I'm not a music journalist.
We're paying for this ourselves. We're reaching out to our community folks that are just in the DIY scene. Folks that are not touring the world, multimillionaire musicians. So yeah, I think it is absolutely a do-it-yourself project, and we really want to keep it that way. We really want to keep as few hierarchies as possible. We want to keep it as much as like a conversation back and forth with the community as possible. And this is not a money-making endeavor. Maybe eventually, but like that's not why we're doing this, and that's honestly not why zines have ever been made.
I guess I meant more the other part you touched on, which is like how it impacts what you want to cover and talk about, editorial wise.
Oh yeah, well, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say our goal is more to be a platform and like a space for collaboration to happen between folks who are working on different creative projects, rather than it being the, like you said, the Elizabeth and Sarah show where we just talk about what we want to talk about. And it's meant to be more of a space and a catalyst for conversations to happen rather than like a from on high. We're telling you what's good in the music scene.
Yeah, and even like for our next issue, we're having somebody write a piece about putting together a house venue. There's a new house venue in Tacoma Park called Hell that is having its first show on Wednesday. Very excited to go. Steph, who's running the show, is going to be writing a piece about the process of how do you start a house venue during COVID? How do you, make people wear masks and check vaccine cards? And yeah, I'm giving away everything in the next issue. Sorry. I hope you still will read it. So, we want to try and cover the stories of folks that are not, we're not going to be going to the anthem and asking them how they put on shows. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great. Cool. Yeah. So, we have flyers. DC Zine Fest is happening October 24th. It's honestly like the coolest, one of the coolest DC community events that happens. It couldn't happen in person last year, but it's happening in person this year, outdoors in Brooklyn. It's going to be sick. We're going to table, but there's going to be so much good art.
So many cool.
Yeah.
Artists, vendors, like merch,
zinesters. Yeah. So please grab one of these. Please go to this. I'm also going to use this moment to just say, we do have zines available downstairs. We have loose copies, but we also have packs that have the newest Riza print poster. It's super beautiful, really great texture. Thank you, Erica, for printing these. Incredible work. And then we also have these really cool stickers that, if you want to put in a bar bathroom or on a stop sign, I would encourage it. So that's available as well. Any other questions? Yes.
Sorry, do you have any tips for people who want to start a zine and don't know where to start?
Yes, go to a zine lab. DC Zine Fest puts on monthly ish zine labs that happen. They're virtually accessible. I don't know if they're doing them in person again yet. They used to be at libraries. They're definitely accessible virtually. They're a great place to start. If you've never made a zine before, they will get you well on your way.
Yeah, I'll also say that your perspective and your voice matter.
Yes.
Never doubt that, because you'll start making and then people will identify with what you're making and they'll be excited about it. And honestly, most people don't put down on paper or make into books their thoughts, feelings, experiences, stories. So the fact that you're even doing it at all is already really incredible, and you should never doubt that.
Yeah, and if you're interested, if you want to get your feet wet, if maybe you're not ready to make your own first full zine, if you want to work with us, we would love to meet you and talk to you about what you're excited about. So let us know.
Leslie, where can we find and keep up with you and your work?
Yeah, so at PaperJam DC is our Instagram handle.
And PaperJamDC.com.
Yeah, and then last slide. Thank you, Lost City Bookstore. Thank you, PaperJam Computer. Thank you, these photos also were by Mike Kimchi and Aman El Saeed. Thank you so much for your beautiful photography and artwork.
There is wine available that you can drink. You're welcome to schmingle around for a bit.